Hello and welcome to Office Hours by Bit Gardner. John here from marketing. As always, I'd like to welcome you. Today, our trying to wrap up color appearance, anything goes. If you have some questions, if there's anything we can help with, just drop it in the chat. And the hour is yours. We are recording this, so our discussion immediately following the presentation, you'll be emailed that link. If you need to take screenshots, our presenter, Noah Morgan, he's one of our applications specialists. He has a wealth of knowledge at his fingertips, and we can kind of be all over the place. I have some questions on my end, but really this is your time. So please chime in and let us know how we can help you. Noah, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good.
We made it to December.
That's right. We finally made it. Year went by real quick. Somehow we're in December now.
I know. It's amazing. And I was just looking back at, while we're waiting for some folks to chime in with some questions here, looking back over the year, we talked color theory, appearance theory, color measurement tools and uses, physical testing, field testing. We talked about gloss, its theory, applications, effect colors, dispersion, transmission haze clarity, measuring texture and grain. What else? Color difference equations, smart chart pelt, our multi-layer film thickness instrument, and how to make the most of it. Did I miss anything? We had a lot.
No, yeah, we had a plethora of information we dove into, and then we did some discussions around software, data integration, best way to share data. So it's been a jam-packed year, I'd say.
Yeah, and we got a new approach coming for 2026. I'll fill you all in on that in a little later. Well, if anyone has questions, just log them in. We'll get to them. In the meantime, Noah and I will chat about color and appearance stuff if that works for you, Noah.
Absolutely.
All right. So, looking back at all the stuff we've done, whether you're measuring, solid color, effect color, gloss, are there any, process things that everybody should follow by the book, so that shift to shift, factory to factory, your results are a true apples to apples comparison? Can you just talk about that importance?
Yeah, and I'd say the first thing is sample preparation is a big one. And what I mean by that is when you go to measure a sample, how do you prepare it? What processes are you going through? Are you following a specific procedure to set it up a certain way? Those want to be known things whenever you're trying to implement a quality control measure or just a process control measure, because you want to be able to do things the same way every time. Keep everything consistent. People say consistency is key all the time. Sample preparation is a big factor in that. And so whenever you go to take a measurement of something, just make sure that you're keeping all variables the same so that any difference in numerical values can be attributed purely to a change in the material and not a change in how the measurement was taken, what parameters were used during the measurement, what scale you're using. So you want to make sure all of your metrics are the same as far as how you're taking measurements, how that data is being recorded, what settings are in the instrument, no matter whether it's for appearance, physical test, or color, making sure all of your settings are exactly the same to align with other labs or other locations. So I'd say the biggest thing that goes above everything else is keeping everything consistent, making a consistent process, or even standardizing that process between several locations, one location. Oftentimes, a good practice is to have either a team or a person dedicated to that, just to make sure every location is following the same process, essentially. Yep.
And to document that and to train on that, because it's definitely going to affect your numbers and your data, on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, training's a big one, whether it comes from a professional training, if you have people come in to train your employees, or just employees training employees. But when you have new people come on, it's very important that they know how to take measurements the right way, because if measurements are taken the wrong way, if they're not prepared the same, this could throw off variables and throw off readings that otherwise wouldn't have been thrown off if everyone would have knew how to take the measurement accurately.
Yep. When you mention sample prep, are you seeing things occur over and over that are just not recommended? In your work with the customers.
Yeah, it depends. I'd say usually what you'll see is just bad practice, and that comes from just a lack of training, I would say, where you'll go in somewhere and measurements are being taken on, let's say, scratched samples or scratched standards, bad practices. Because ideally, if you're trying to measure the color of something, you don't want to measure over a defect or an imperfection. You want to get a representative color measurement or a representative appearance measurement that tells you what's actually happening in the material or the sample. And so if you have these bad practices of taking measurements, maybe not on a representative location, or using bad samples, let's say for the instance of if I'm measuring powders, how do I prepare those powders to be measured? Do I put them into, let's say, a cup and then press it down to where it's all flat and take a measurement that way? Do I just put it into a cup and take a measurement of the cup? A lot of different ways you can go about it, and it's good in that case to have a standard method that tells you exactly how to do it, when to do it, and even why is helpful in some cases.
Yeah, and that consistency, that is definitely the key. Also, sample prep, and then when you get to actually using instrumentation, can you talk a bit about measurement direction and why that's so critical as well?
Yeah, directionality is a critical point, I would say, for metallic instruments, because when you have a metallic instrument, you're usually measuring, or not metallic, let's say a multi-angle instrument, because you're measuring at multiple angles. And so usually in those geometries, the light comes from one direction. And so it means with that linear light, you're going to get different measurement data depending if you turn the instrument slightly and take the measurement a different way with a different angle. Because your lights, depending on the sample too, it'll throw off all of your readings. So linear measurement is important to know, because if you start taking measurements differently, again, by changing the orientation, you're going to increase your variability. Even though it could be the case that the samples are exactly the same, but now because you're measuring them differently, you're going to get different numbers.
Yeah. Nice. Questions out there, folks, just log them in the chat, or if there's anything we can help with. Maybe talk a little bit, kind of going back to the color theory presentation. Can you talk a little bit about 45-0 versus sphere instrumentation? What industries have standardized on which one and why?
Yeah, certainly. So with color measurement, there's two different ways to measure color. Let's say two general ways. One of them is to measure color as our human eyes perceive it, which will take into account your gloss, your texture. If you imagine if I looked at a glossy surface with my eyes, that glossy surface is going to make the color look deeper, more vibrant usually, versus if I'm looking at a matte surface, same color, but it's matte. Microtexture is going to scatter the light and make it look more dull. Usually it looks whiter, lighter in color, just because you have more white reflectance in there. And so you'll get a different appearance depending on the surface texture. And that's measurable if you use a 45-0 instrument, because that instrument's designed to measure how our eyes perceive. And so it'll pick up those differences in the surface texture, whether it's gloss, matte, semi-gloss, and translate that into color values that correlate to what we're seeing. The other method is using spin or spherical geometry, essentially where it excludes the spectral light, the gloss reflection, and you get purely the pigmentation values. So in other words, if I only care about that I'm using the same raw color and I don't care about the surface appearance, whether it's textured or not, then I'd use a sphere instrument to tell me that I'm using the same pigment. So all my pigments are the same, but I don't care about the surface texture. Maybe I'm in injection molding and all of my samples, all my products are going to have a different end texture. I don't necessarily care about the end texture. I care about the color, making sure all my molds are using the same pigmented color. In that case, I'll use a sphere instrument to give me just the pure pigmentation values, make sure they all match.
Yeah.
But it's not going to look for the surface texture match.
Nice. Nice. And we talked too earlier in the year about metamerism and some of those causes of why that occurs. You mind, touching on that a bit?
Yeah. Metamerism is a big thing because a lot of times you'll have fails just due to the metamerism properties or how that's being perceived. To generalize it, metamerism is a situation where you may have two samples, and let's say they look identical under one light source, but under a different light source, they look different. And it's typically due to different pigments. So, you can make a color with any combination of pigments and then make a color with another combination of pigments. You can get to the same color, but in some cases, those colors will look different. And that's what metamerism is. Under a warm lighting, so let's say like indoor home lighting, you have warm undertones. And so the spectral light coming from that light source is stronger in the reds. And in that case, if I had a red sample under that warm lighting, it's going to make that sample look a lot more red. And vice versa, if I had a green or blue sample in a fluorescent light, it's going to make that color look more green or blue just because of the spectral light that's hitting the sample. And so in the case where you have two identical samples that match, let's say a red, two reds that match under daylight, and then I go to look at that same two sample under fluorescent light.
Yeah.
If there's a difference in pigments that were used, I might see a big difference between my red samples now under my fluorescent light just because of the spectral energy that's being cast over those two samples. And so they now appear differently, even though under daylight they completely matched. And so that's metamerism. And it's a measurable type of value where you can take a spectrophotometer and use multiple luminance to determine how a color is changing under light sources. Or as a quality control measure, check the colors of things under multiple light sources. And you can get what's called an MI index or metamerism index value that essentially will say how these colors are swaying as you move across the light sources.
Yeah.
And it's a good piece of data to use in quality control because you're able to not just match under daylight, but you then know exactly what those colors will look like under house light, fluorescent light, different aspects of daylight, let's say like a horizon situation. And this is used in the automotive world where, you have a car being displayed in a showroom, which usually has some type of fluorescent light. And then you can also have it shown outside in a dealership. And so all of the colors need to match. If it's in the showroom, if it's outside, if it's in somebody's garage, you need them to match in every situation. And so it's a lot more, let's say, intensive in those situations because if the product's going to be shown in multiple situations, you need to make sure every part of it matches in every situation.
Yeah. So it makes sense and all the difference. Before we got on here, you mentioned you had a couple thoughts that you want to talk about. What's on your mind?
Yes.
I sound like a therapist. No, I'm just marketing. No, not that important.
Yeah. What can we talk about today?
Yeah.
I just had a couple of points that, that go along with the topic of everything. Just real world cases where let's say we had a situation where we had two global sites. And both of them, traditionally, they look at each other's color values of their production lines and make sure everything's matching. And they had a case where one location was passing with everything and the other location was failing with everything.
Okay.
And so it was an immediate red flag saying, why is this location failing on all their color measurements? And so there was a deep dive going into the material science, the application of the paints, trying to figure out what this discrepancy was. And it ended up being something as simple as just a different setting in an instrument. And so that's, in those cases, you want to stress, again, the standardization aspect. If you're all using the same equipment and you're doing the same processes, you should get the same outcome. And if you start to see that you're not getting the same outcome, one of the quickest and easiest ways to check why that could be is just making sure that your instrument settings are the same. In this specific case, one location was using what's called a 10-degree observer. The other location was using a 2-degree observer. And this is just a small, somewhat overlooked setting on a spectrophotometer. But if you use if they're different, you're going to get different measurement data. And that's what was happening here. And then happened to be that when they switched it back to the right setting, everything was passing and it looked normal. So crisis avoided, but it's good to know that you should use, or at least as a troubleshooting measure, look at the settings you're using to make sure everything's matching.
Yep. And okay, another kind of taking this in a different direction, another way to avoid that is to use digital standards, correct?
Absolutely. That's one way to do it, because with a digital standard, not only are you sending the exact color files for what that color is, but you're sending all the tolerance and the setting information. And so traditionally, if I just sent you a physical standard, you would have that color, but you wouldn't have the settings that go with it. But now if I were to send a digital standard, you not only have that color, but you have every setting associated with that. And so now it's a literal one-for-one match, unlike before where you have the possibility of things getting out of whack.
Nice. And anything else on digital standards while we're talking about it, the importance or, benefits or even, some cons or things to be aware of?
Oh, yeah, digital standards. They're nice.
I mean that we've had webinars on that topic for hours, but give us the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, digital standards are good because everybody's able to match the exact same color. So I measure a color, it gets me my color coordinates, my LED values for what that color is, and then I send that digitally to all my locations, and now everybody's matching to the exact same reference standard. Whereas before, you have physical standards, you have to ship them out every year, which is costly. They get damaged, they have to be taken care of, they have to be saved in a specific location. A lot of additional things you have to take care of, on top of the fact that sometimes they may slightly be different. They're made so that they're always the same, but sometimes you can have a little bit of variation. And that's caused issues down the road where you have situations where your two target standards already mismatch to a degree. So when I start to measure samples compared to those standards, I could have samples that pass, but they're on the edge of the spec. And the same thing could happen for the other location where they pass, but they're on the edge of the spec. But because my two targets never matched in the beginning, now when you bring those two passing products that were on the edge of the spec, you bring them together, you see that those look vastly different. And so digital standards combats that type of situation ever coming up by making it so everybody goes the exact same target. So big benefits out of that, especially with the idea that you get all the settings with it too. So it really mitigates user error, I'd say.
Yeah, and that's what you want, especially plant to plant, facility to facility, shift to shift, even. And it all comes back to your locking down those procedures and that standardized, consistent process time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. What else is on your list?
All right, let's see.
What else you got?
Appearance testing. So we have a lot of different appearance equipment. some that measure orange peel of surfaces, some that measure the reflection haze of surfaces. You have the gloss of a surface. You have haze and transmission, so how light passes through an object. So a lot of different methods for testing appearance surfaces. I know we have a couple different presentations specifically on each of those topics, which are always nice to look at. One of the ideas I had brought up, let's see, I think more of a general idea we can go into here is just looking at different specs. You have different specs for different instruments. Having a way that you can coordinate what products need specific testing with specific instruments, and then keeping track of all of those, let's say, tolerances or spec information. So a good quality control system is going to keep track of all of your specs, all of your instrumentation calibrations, making sure everything is working properly, that when you go to test with those pieces of equipment, you can ensure that it's completely accurate and the data that you're going to get out of it is accurate as well. And I think that's across the board, whether it's color, appearance, or a physical test piece of equipment. It's just if you have a piece of equipment to keep it in running order, to keep all your documents in check, but those are all good practices to have.
Yeah, exactly. I think in passing we talked or mentioned effect colors, and effect colors and measuring sparkle. We have the Big Mac Eye multi-angle spectrophotometer for that. Can you talk a little bit about the different angles in that instrument and which ones are used to characterize that sparkle value?
Yeah, certainly. So with the Big Mac Eye, you have multi-angle color measurement. So if you have metallic flakes or you have, let's say, metallic samples, you want to measure with the multi-angle instrument because the color is changing as you change your viewing angle. You see a color flop or a light dark flop. There's some sort of color change as you look across the sample. So with the multi-angle instrument, you'll have the different geometries, the different angles of measurement. So you get the full story of what the coating is doing as you change your viewing angle.
Yeah.
It records all of that information, but also records sparkle information. The sparkle information is nice because I think it does 3 different angles, 75, 25, and 110. And when you look at these angles for sparkle, you can see certain situations where, let's say, I think it's at 75 degrees. If I look at my sparkle is changing consistently between all of my measurements. Okay. It tells me that my flake isn't laying flat or isn't laying the same. So ideally, when I take my sparkle measurements, I want all of my sparkle values to be pretty close to one another at the same angle. Like all my 75s, my 75 degree angle, all my numbers should be relatively the same. And if it's not the same, that tells me that when I'm applying this coating to my substrate, that I may not be applying it in the same manner. And so my flake's not laying consistent, which could throw off my appearance and my readings as well. Another good way to use it, I think, is at the 110 degree sparkle angle. You essentially get measurements for the sparkle that tell you how much sparkle is in that surface by sparkle area, and then how intense is that sparkle, how bright is that sparkle. And so if you see differences in the sparkle intensity and the sparkle area at the 110 degree angle, that could be an inclination that your formulation is different. So I'm not using the correct type of sparkle in this case. And so that'll throw off both of those values. And it's nice to you not only get this quantifying method of being able to quantify all of the influences that give you what that appearance is, the sparkle and the color, but you can also use those values to then troubleshoot issues in the process. So like I just said, you can figure out, okay, is this a formulation issue or is this an application issue? And then go from there. So it's a good troubleshooting tool, not only just a tool for figuring out what color you have.
Yeah, right? No, well put. And now also when you're dealing with effect colors, you have the sparkle, but also graininess. What's the difference between sparkle and graininess, and how does that work differently?
Yes. So graininess is sparkle, but without direct light. So if I were to, let's say, go to a car outside and I shine a flashlight at it, I would see sparkle. But if I didn't shine the flashlight at it, and let's say it was an overcast day, there's no direct light, then I would see what's called graininess. And it's like you'll see it's pretty obvious. It's more of like a salt and pepper grainy look. I wouldn't say it's sparkly by any means.
Okay.
And in the instrument, it's quantifying it by just, again, using a non-direct illumination. So it's like an overcast illumination, and it picks up how grainy is the surface look. So the difference in what that appearance is, again, is looking at the side of a car on a cloudy day versus a bright sunny day. You'll see a very clear difference between sparkle and graininess.
Gotcha. And then the multi-angle will capture both of those values to give you that full picture, correct?
Yep. It'll pick up, like I said, the overcast look, so that graininess look, in conjunction with the sparkle, and then all your color values. So it really gives you a full picture of what's happening on the surface.
Nice. And had a question in here. Is sparkle the same as metallic? And I think sparkle, that's an element of measuring metallics or effect coatings. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think it goes hand in hand in different industries, depending on what you're working with.
Okay.
If I'm making a metallic coating, the metallic flake in that is going to be what eventually sparkles too. And so in that case, it's the same. In another case, maybe you use a different type of flake pigment, and that's going to sparkle in a different way. So I would say in some cases they go hand in hand, in other cases not. It depends on what you're referring to.
Okay.
The context.
All right. Larry, did that answer your question? Let's see, give him a minute to respond here. But yeah, we're busy preparing schedule for 2026 and our office hours webinars. Again, we're going to keep the same format as we have here, a shortened presentation, usually 20-25 minutes, and then open Q&A like this. Some of the topics we have planned: when the color is matched, trust grows, the science of repeatability, an office hours dedicated to metamerism, lab discipline, process consistency, failure analysis, beyond delta E and color difference equations, precision, early and subtle deviations in color, sample prep nightmares. Lot of good stuff and new stuff coming. Another question here. Can you explain what haze measurement is in relation to gloss measurement? There are a number of manufacturers of gloss meters. One manufacturer, RowPoint, has a gloss meter that also measures haze. Is that a valid attribute to measure?
Yes, great question.
Yeah.
So there's two types of hazes that you'll see in measurement technical terms. There's reflection haze, which is what you're referring to here, and then there's transmission haze. So reflection haze is when you look at a surface, usually it's a high gloss surface, and when I look at it, there's a hazy aspect to it where it's creating not a very clear reflected image. So if I look at a mirror, I'm going to see a perfectly clear represented image of my face, a reflected image. If I look at a mirror that's very, let's say, has a lot of micro texture in it, and so it's going to scatter some of that reflected light instead. And now when I look at it, I'll still get a high gloss surface, but I'll get a very fuzzy reflected image. And that's what reflection haze is referring to. And usually it's a cause of, or it can be a cause of many different things. Usually it's microstructure, so just tiny little texture that's on the surface. That could be a result from not good media milling, not good processing during during some of the development parts of the formula. But it can be a result of a lot of different things, but for the most part, it's when you look at a glossy surface and you see a reflected image and it's very hazy, very milky looking. It's not a clear reflected image. That's what reflection haze is looking at. And so in those gloss meters that also have this haze measurement, what it's truly measuring is just around the near specular angle. So I send light at 45 degrees and it reflects off of the surface at 45 degrees. At that near 45 degrees, it's going to reflect light. And so we're looking at specifically light around that reflecting angle. And as that light starts to scatter out more and more, we'll get more reflection haze. And if it's more focused towards the beam, then we'll get less reflection haze. So really, it's just another way to quantify how well an image is reflecting off of a surface.
Yep. And do the Bic gauges measure haze?
Yeah. So we had an instrument. It was called the Haze Gloss. I think we discontinued it last year, but it might be developments of a newer one in the future. So as of right now, we don't have it, but I think we will in the future here.
Well, we have the Haze Guard.
Oh yeah, Haze Guard, but that measures transmission haze.
Yeah,
as light passes through or something for clear products and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, Larry, you're correct. Sparkle is a characteristic of the metallics. So you're good there. You're good. Let's see. What else, Noah?
What else?
You got something else on your list?
Let me
I can keep going all day.
I think one good point to talk about is delta E. What is delta E? We don't have to get too deep into it, but delta E is a way to look at color. So when you're measuring color, it's a way to look at color where it'll tell you just the total difference from one color to another. There's a lot of different equations that'll do that for you. Some are older, some are newer. The newer ones, for the most part, are more accurate to what we visually see with our human eye. But I think for the most part, the typical value in which we start to see a visual difference is a delta E of about 1.5. And that's not universal for all colors. Some colors we're more sensitive towards, like blues and reds, and pastel colors, like gray, white, tan, things like that. And some colors we have are less sensitive to, so we won't see differences as clearly. But for the most part, 1.5, the delta E of 1.5 is when you start to see that difference. And so you'll see some people in different industries have very tight tolerances. I've seen all the way down to a 0.3 as a tolerance, which is very, very tight. And in some cases, if your tolerances are so tight, it may be very difficult to achieve passing products in your production. And it may be worth looking into decreasing those tolerances to then increase more production value as you pass more samples. Because sometimes you'll see it in a lot of cases, those tolerances are so tight that it just doesn't make sense, like numerically.
Then you get part failure left and right on something that's not even visually, I guess, aware.
You'll get cases where something will say it numerically fails, and if you go to look at it visually, it looks identical, and you can't even tell the difference. I think if you see something like that come up, that's a great sign to say, hey, let's look at our tolerances and see if this is right.
Yeah. No, good point. We got Chad asks here, does Bitgardner offer any coding or process troubleshooting guides?
I think it depends on the instrument. We have some short guide things for certain instruments, like our orange peel meter, our wave scan, I think some thickness gauges. I don't think we have anything too general.
I think look on our website on the product pages and look at the downloads, because we're constantly adding things to that. so you might find what you're looking for, or just reach out to us directly, and we can get you the right information, review your process, and help out where we can. I also dropped the link to our knowledge library in the chat here, and that's to all of our articles. They're organized by color, appearance, physical test, and some other things as well. So you can use those as reference in addition. Another question here regarding SCI and SCE. These only apply to sphere spectros, correct? And if you have a 45-0, you wouldn't have the specular included, excluded setting. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's exactly right.
All right.
Sometimes you'll see. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you want to talk, again, it's for sphere instruments only. Do you want to talk a little bit about specular included versus excluded? What those are? Yeah,
so specular included, SCI, or you'll see it as SPIN, spin. So there's different acronyms for it, but they mean the same thing. For the most part, SCI, specular included, will give you your pure color. It will not see the effect of the gloss in the measurement. Whereas your SCE, specular excluded, or you'll see it called SPEX, specs, will give you measurements that correlate somewhat to 45-0, but as it gets higher in gloss, it changes. It's not as close. But specs is a way to get the color measurement that includes the influence of the gloss. Yeah. And the idea is they're both added to the sphere instrument so that you can have a way of measuring color without taking into the gloss, or without taking the gloss into consideration, and then a way to measure the color with taking into consideration the gloss. That's why you don't see it on a 45-0.
Gotcha. Good questions, folks. Keep them coming here. We got a few minutes left. Man, the end of the year sure crept up on us, didn't it? Still trying to get 2025 stuff done and plan for 2026. I'm sure everyone out there is feeling the same. Let's see what else. Color difference equations. Do you want to touch on that for a bit?
Yeah, color difference equations. I think I said earlier, the older ones don't correlate as well to the human eye, but as they got more advanced, they added more factors and more adjustments that you can make to correlate better. The whole goal is for color difference equations is to have one tolerance for every color, and then the equation will essentially just adjust how big or wide that tolerance is depending on the exact color you're looking at. So what I could do with that is, let's say, in the past, if I use delta E star, which is the first ever color difference equation, I would, in theory, have to go look at every single one of my colors. If I make 50 colors, I'd have to look at all 50 of those colors and then develop my own tolerance for LAB on that specific color. With newer equations, instead of going that route, which is very time consuming, I can take, let's say, I think the newest one is delta E 2000.
Yep.
I can take this equation, and then I can say, okay, well, for every color, I want it all to use the delta E 2000 equation. And at that point, the equation does all the work. And so if I go to measure two colors, depending on the color, let's say I measure a blue, it's going to weight that tolerance for the blue region that I'm in, for that exact color I measured, and then give me let's say a calculated tolerance for how well that'll perceive against the human eye. And so it'll essentially be it'll make its own tolerance for you. And if it's outside of that tolerance, you'll most likely see it as a different color. But if it's inside the tolerance, it'll usually be exactly the same. So
is that the weighted versus unweighted?
Yep, weighted versus unweighted. So basically, it does all the work for you and creates an equation that makes sense and a tolerance that makes sense for what that color is. Whereas the older delta E star equations, the unweighted equations, you'd have to physically run studies to figure out what's the best tolerance for that color. So
Nice.
new equations, to sum it up, help you bypass all the extra work by doing the calculation for you.
Nice. How would you proceed if the delta E measurement is good, under 1.00, but either the delta L, A, or B are greater than 1?
In a situation like that, I would want to look at samples visually because it's flagging one of those values, meaning that it's probably, let's say, as an example, a lot of times you'll see a spec for delta E, but nothing else. And that could be the case of this, where if I pass my delta E, everything's good. But if I don't, then I have to fail something. But it's also good to look at the values that make up the delta E, which is the LA, the B values. And so if you see one of them is off, it could be an inclination. Like if my L was too light and it was off, but everything else was fine. If I go and look at those samples, because my L value is really high, I'm probably going to see a visual color difference between the other samples. So I think if you have a case like this, it's probably best just to go look at the samples physically and see if you see that numerical difference that it's measuring. And if you do, you might want to reconsider passing it or letting it through. But it all depends on what it looks like, right?
Gotcha. Spin specs again. It seems like spin and specs definitions are reversed. Is it me just seeing this?
No, you are right in that it is kind of tricky to wrap your mind around it.
Okay.
But always know that specular included, SPIN, spin, measures pure color without texture. Specular excluded measures with the texture. And it's a weird way that they have it set up. The idea is what's happening is that for the specs measurement, there's an exclusion port at the top for the gloss, and it'll actually open up that exclusion port to pick up the gloss, whereas the other one includes the gloss in the color measurement. So that's why you have specular included versus specular excluded, because it's excluded from the measurement and picked up as the gloss.
Gotcha. And then follow up to that question, just for clarification, the 45.0 is measuring the equivalent of a specs.
So they measure similarly. They don't measure equivalent to one another.
Okay.
It's the specs is more so a way where you can use the sphere instrument to get measurements that correlate to what you see. So they somewhat correlate to 45.0, but it's just as a quick check, not really one for one. So you'll sometimes see 45.0 and specs data correlate pretty close to the same.
Okay.
But I think it's as you decrease in gloss, that correlation greatly diminishes. And we have a presentation just on those two geometries and looking at them. It has some measurement data too, which is pretty nice.
Nice. Yeah. Why don't you, if you can pull that for me, Noah, I can send it to Larry.
Yeah.
Or I'll get you his email address. You can send it directly, and then he can ask you any follow-up questions without marketing guy in the middle here, if that works. Cool. So what else? Other questions, comments, anything we can help with? I'll also know too, once you get the recording or, whether it's this or any other marketing messages, you can hit reply. It'll come to my team, and we can route it to the appropriate technical expert in your area to get your questions answered, or to get Noah involved here too on the application side of things. So let's see. So specs will measure the true color irrespective of texture and gloss.
Spin will measure the true color irregardless of the texture.
Okay, let me read it again. So specs will measure the true color irrespective of texture or gloss. Is that backwards?
Yeah, backwards. So specs will measure the color with the gloss. Sorry, let me say it like this. Specs measure the color and take into account the gloss or the texture. Spin will only measure the pure color without taking into account the gloss texture.
Okay, got it.
It's a weird way they have it, but it's,
yeah. No worries at all. Yeah, Larry, I'll have we'll have Noah send you that information and connect with you directly, just to make sure. But yeah, that is clear. I have one of our business line managers texting me saying that confuses me too. So yeah, you're not alone. That's for sure. So let's see. With that, we don't have any other questions here. I think we can wrap it up here for 2025 anyway. Thank you, Noah, for all your support and expertise throughout the year. And thank you in advance for the brain power that you'll be expending next year for everyone. We'll work on those presentations together. But everyone out there, thank you for joining us. Today and throughout the year. We'll look forward to seeing you in 2026. Have a wonderful holiday season. Hope you can all take some time off and unplug for a bit. And we'll see you after the new year. Noah, any parting words from you?
Nothing more from me, but you guys know where to find us, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Wednesday and a great holiday season. We'll see you.